its staff, management, or sponsor.
Download the iRadio Now app for iPhone or Android phones. Free at your iPhone App Store or Android App Market. Take AM 1470 WWNN with you wherever you go.
America's service members and veterans are strong, forged out of bravery, sacrifice, and duty. They are diverse, unique, from all corners of the country, and, thanks to their common experience, a family for life. But whether they served in lands far away or communities close to home, some of these men and women may face difficult times or even crisis, but sometimes reaching out for help can be the most challenging and worthwhile mission of all for veterans, service members, Reserve, and National Guard. Thankfully, friends, family, and communities are standing by their service members and veterans now more than ever. We're all in this together. When you recognize something isn't right, make the call to the Veterans Crisis Line or Military Crisis Line. During times of crisis, reach out and call. Dial 1-800-273-8255 and press 1, or chat online at veteranscrisisline.net or text 838-255.
I was visiting my 75-year-old aunt the other day when her phone rang.
Hello? It's you again.
She seemed nervous.
Well, I don't think I need any more life insurance.
The caller was doing a great job keeping my aunt on the line.
Okay, so you need my credit card number?
My aunt went to get her purse, so I decided that I would ask a few questions. Well, as soon as I introduced myself, the caller hung up.
Ruff the Crime Dog here. Recognizing the signs of fraud can be difficult for older people. Often they're very trusting and consider it impolite to hang up. The National Crime Prevention Council wants to educate seniors so that these scams can be reported to local law enforcement agencies.
Financial fraud can include identity theft, fake check and wire transfer scams, investment and credit card fraud, and online charitable solicitations. Unfortunately, only 1 in 5 of these crimes are reported. To learn more, go to ncpc.org/seniors. That's ncpc.org/seniors. A message from the National Crime Prevention Council and the U.S. Department of Justice.
Hello, everyone. This is Ana Ortiz, and I'm here with Fernanda. Hello. Fernanda's story is one everybody should hear. That's why I'm helping to lend my voice. Now, what happened, Fernanda?
Well, I'm the wife of a teacher. Recent budget cuts meant there wasn't enough to provide for our 3 young children, with another on the way. I picked up part-time work, and we did everything we could, but we really struggled to make ends meet. We realized we had to swallow our pride and ask for help. The food bank kept us afloat during some hard times. I'm just glad we had somewhere to turn to.
Today, 1 in 6 Americans don't know where their next meal is coming from. Fernanda here could be your neighbor, your coworker, or your friend. She's just like you, and you probably don't even know she's struggling. But you can make a difference in Fernanda's life today. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank to help.
I'm Fernanda.
And I'm Ana Ortiz. Together, we're Feeding America.
A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Talk 1470, WWNN, Pompano Beach, WKIS HD3, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
AM 1470 WNN. Listen live at WWNNradio.com and like us on Facebook. Search AM 1470 WWNN.
If you have a family member who's in need of or will be in need of long-term care and for whatever reason does not have long-term care insurance, you're probably in a panic. You ask yourself, what are we going to do? How will we pay for it? Will we be forced to sell our home? Will this bankrupt our family? Well, this is Steve Kane with good news. It's not too late. I want you to call my good friend, attorney Barry Siegel. He will employ effective legal strategies to help you qualify for Veteran Administration and Medicaid benefits that will cover the cost of long-term care without jeopardizing the financial security of your family that you have worked so hard for. Attorney Barry Siegel, with offices from Palm Beach to Miami, call today for a no-charge consult, 1-855-FLA-3782. That's 1-855-FLA-3782.
When it comes to buying or refinancing a home, don't miss the boat. Home prices are ticking up. Don't put off making a move any longer. Call Michael Kotze at Choice Mortgage Bank, 561-441-2730. while rates are still at historic lows. Act now, get approved and pre-qualified, and buy your dream home. If you're currently paying over $800 a month rent, call 561-441-2730 now, before interest rates go up. Get down payments as low as 3.5%. Veterans may qualify for no money down and 100% financing. If you already own a home but you're upside down, call Michael Kotze at Choice Mortgage Bank. If you're being denied by your bank, or if your loan processing is taking too long, call 561-441-2730. Don't miss the boat. Act now while fixed rates are still under 3.5%. Rates and terms subject to change daily without notice. Equal housing lender, MLS number 122081.
What you want to know. What you need to know.
Talk 1470. WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the People's Advocate Hour with South Florida Attorney Joseph Bryan. Listen for the next hour as Attorney Joseph Bryan informs you on different legal topics. Whether you are considering bankruptcy or dealing with mortgage or debt issues, Joe can help you. Knowledge is power. Don't fear the unknown. Get answers to your burning legal questions now. So call in and ask Attorney Joseph Bryan to answer your questions. 888-565-1470. And now, here's Attorney Joseph Bryan.
Good day, this is the People's Advocate Hour, and I'm Joseph Bryan, and we're on WNN 1470. I'm here to answer your questions and take your calls. First part tonight, we're going to be talking about various different areas of law, but I thought since this is our first time on the radio, I thought I'd give a little background on myself. My name is Joseph Bryan. I'm a local attorney serving Palm Beach to Miami, and I provide services in pretty much 22 areas of law with a focus on bankruptcy and foreclosure. In addition, I am here to help you with issues to do with your debt, issues to do with your family, issues to do with concerns that you have as we go through the process here. Originally from the north, and now I'm here in the south. Let's have you give a call in to 888-565-1470. Let's talk about some of the concerns that you may have going home today. You've just worked a hard day on the job, you're sitting in your car, or you're at home or in front of the computer watching us in live streaming on WNN1470.com. The reality is that we've gone through a very difficult time starting around 2007, and a lot of us are not through it. A lot of us are still trying to struggle along and trying to figure out what to do and how to handle problems. Some of us are finding ourselves in foreclosure. Some of us are finding ourselves not able to meet our debt obligations and not able to pay our bills on a timely basis. Some of us are beginning to wonder what are our choices. And some are finding that they come home and we find that our phone has been ringing off the hook because the creditors are calling. What to do, what to do. Well, the purpose of the People's Advocate Hour is to give you answers to the questions that you may have. Once again, call in if you have any at 888-565-1470. In the meantime, let's just talk about the options that exist to you. You're dealing with debt. You're not too sure where to go. You're dealing with a foreclosure. You're not too sure what to do. Some of you have already retained attorneys for different issues and you're not too sure. Well, let's just talk about, first of all, foreclosure. A lot of people are still in it. A lot of people are applying for modifications or considering short selling because they're upside down in their house. But finally, the federal government has finally done something right. And in January, certain laws came into effect that should have been in effect actually from the very beginning when the TARP was started. One example would be the real estate the RESPA and the TILA. These are two statutes that regulate the lenders out there, And as of January, for the first time, you can no longer go dual track. What that means is, say you have an application, a complete application for your loan modification before the bank. They can't continue through a foreclosure and into a foreclosure sale while they're reviewing your application. They can't do both. They can review your application, and then only then can they then go forward in the foreclosure. Well, since the beginning of this nightmare, in this foreclosure nightmare and this economic downturn, they were able to go on both tracks while they continue to spend and ask you for more and more information. They continue with their foreclosure, and all of a sudden you have a foreclosure sale around the corner, and you still don't have an answer to your modification. And they could actually literally foreclose you out of your house while you still have an application before them. Well, as of early January this year, when the law came into effect, they can no longer do both. They have to finish your modification application or your short sale application or some other loss mitigation application that may exist within the banks, and only then may they go forward with the process of foreclosing. This is a wonderful change, and I, as an attorney, have thought that this is the way it should have been from day one. I always found it very frustrating where the banks were so callous as to continue forward with a foreclosure process while they were trying to resolve things with the borrower. You know, they'd be calling them on the phone and making all sorts of offers, and still at the same time having their law firms go forward and foreclose them out. One of the other things that are going on is it would appear that the banks are becoming more and more interested in resolving things prior to foreclosure sale. I think that they do a better job when they have a short sale. I think that it works for them better when they get a loan modification. The packages for the loan modification or the short sale are pretty much identical. They're going to ask you to disclose your income, your assets, and that includes your bank accounts. So if you're sitting on $1 million, I doubt, unless it's a very expensive home, they're going to be willing to work with you. But if your finances are showing that about a third of your income can be applied towards the payment of the mortgage, a lot of the banks seem to be more realistic than they have been in the past, and they have been moving more and more forward with modifications. Some of the banks I've seen substantial reductions in principal, but anybody that's talking to you as that's the standing operating procedure with these lenders, you've been misled. It's very few and far between, and it really comes down to the property. It comes down to the ownership of the note, because you may have a bank like Bank of America or Wells Fargo or JP Morgan Chase, but that's who's the front. They're either servicing the loan, but they may not actually be the owners of the promissory note or the owners of the obligation. It could be a private investment group, it could be a hedge fund, it could be a foreign bank could own the loan in a package of loans. And they have their own parameters as to what they will do or won't do. In addition, some have certain insurance plans that were put together in such a way that they will make money or lose money based upon how they come out. Generally speaking, the loan modifications are generally a bit of a loss for the banks, but they're motivated through being good stakeholders in our society, or they're motivated by basically community service. Not to mention the banks put together the investment pool programs that caused our economic collapse, so I guess they have a bit of a moral obligation as well. Short sales, what's going on with short sales? They seem to be more short sales are going on than actual sales of real estate at auctions these days. The reasons why is the banks are motivated to do the short sale because they can control the price better. Also, there's a lot of banks have insurances set up so that any losses that they may have with the short sale are covered by insurance, and they make up their losses through the insurance. And they have parameters put together for what they can and cannot do. However, as you all have noticed, allegedly our economy is getting better. Allegedly, things are on the way up, and so are the prices of real estate. They're up here in Broward. They're up in Miami, and they're up in Palm Beach. And the question really comes down to is, will this continue? But while we're in this process, with the prices of properties going up, one can expect that the banks are demanding more in the short sales. Generally speaking, when I send in a short sale offer, the offers are coming in pretty close to the tax-assessed values on the real estate. However, that may or may not be true. The banks will reevaluate. They send out their own appraisers. Generally, it's a drive-by. Generally, they're not coming into your property. They're just looking at the status of the neighborhood and the quality of the property and how it looks from the outside. They do their own little math, and they come up with their idea of what the property is worth. Sometimes the banks have an unrealistic value, and sometimes they're quick to respond and accept the offer. Sometimes when they accept the offer too soon, I kind of wonder if we offered them too much. But the reality is that short sales seem to be the mainstay that the banks are looking to have happen. They're really not interested in taking the properties to auctions. And in a lot of the cases, most of the buyers at the auctions is actually the lender themselves will buy back the property at the auction and then put it to group together with other properties and will then send it on to hedge funds or other large investors. In addition, with the foreclosure situation, I've heard lots of little stories out there. Stories about being able to buy the promissory note and other different things as a way to circumvent dealing with the bank directly. So far, that's a fable. It's a dream. I'm always uncovering people that say that they can do it, but I've never found anybody that could. It's just not a realistic situation. All right, let's talk about the other choices. Now, generally speaking, if you're in a foreclosure, you're also in a situation where your economic in the house is in a bad shape. Often or not, foreclosure is not the only problem that you're dealing with. Often you have credit card debt, medical debt, expenses that are beyond your means, and you're finding yourself choosing what bills to pay. And that's when, that's something that you can work with for a period of time, but at some point in time, you're going to have to say to yourself, when does this end? One of the things that I noticed coming up to this economic downturn was people who were refinancing their houses every year to 2 years and then taking the money out of their homesteaded property and paying off credit card debt. A lot of people were reticent to say anything negative about this to their clients because, of course, they wanted the income that's related to the real estate transactions. But I often found that if the reason why you were taking the money out of your property was because you had spent too much money, I was more of the opinion that you should try to renegotiate your debt versus take a protected asset like your home, which with all that equity, and then pay down unsecured credit and put the secured credit on your home. And then we had the downfall with properties dropping 30, 40, in some cases 50% of the loan to value. At which point in time a lot of people felt that they didn't want to pay a lot of air. They owed $300,000 on a $120,000 home. And they made the decision sometimes because of economic downturns and sometimes based upon financial decisions. Each person has their own reasons of failing to make the payment on the mortgage, but they found themselves continuing to live the lifestyle because now they don't have to pay the monthly mortgage and haven't made the necessary transition into the new reality. And the reality is they didn't have any money. They weren't able to pay for the mortgage because they were living a lifestyle and paying and managing their credit card debt. And then they reached to a point where they couldn't manage the credit card debt, and now they find themselves what they would say is hitting the wall. Are you hitting the wall? Are you having concerns about debt? If you have concerns and you want to discuss them, the key is to get information, because information is power, and with the power comes the ability to move into a new strategy and a new opportunity. And sometimes that decision includes bankruptcy. Not everybody that comes into me is a good candidate for bankruptcy. Just because you have debt and you're not able to pay the debt doesn't mean that this is a good time. The timing may be bad. or your asset structure may be such that you'll lose a lot and gain very little in bankruptcy. So you kind of have to sit down with an attorney and have them specifically look over your liabilities, your assets, and the benefits that you can gain from bankruptcy. In most cases, with most people are looking at either Chapter 7 liquidation or a payment plan under Chapter 13. Now, in Chapter 7, what you end up doing is you have certain assets that are exempt. One of the biggest assets that most people have is the home. However, a lot of people find themselves upside down in properties, and they're not in the position to continue to make the payment on the mortgage and make the payment on the credit card debt. And then, of course, some people have additional situations which they've run into some medical issues and they've got some large medical debt. Large medical debt to me is something like over $10,000, and some people have come into my offices with $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, depending on how serious their medical issue has been. When they start to look at the situation, they have to consider themselves as to what they own and what they owe. Because here in Florida, although we do have a great protection on the homestead property, there is not a lot of personal property protected. Generally speaking, you're entitled to $1,000 personal property exemption, a $1,000 car exemption. Go out and try to find a car for $1,000 that has air conditioning and can stay on the road. And the other things that they have is some exemptions towards income for the head of the household. And if you're deciding that you're not going to keep your house because you're so far upside down it doesn't make any sense, you've got 2, 3 mortgages, or a mortgage and a home equity line of credit, you may be wanting to get rid of the house. If you don't have homestead property, or you're not intending to keep the homestead property, you're entitled to what's called a $4,000 wild card exemption. Now that doesn't sound like a whole lot, and quite candidly, if you have a car that you own free and clear and it's worth $8,000 or $9,000, the trustee, who's going to be the one representing the interests of the creditors and looking to see what assets he can liquidate in order to pay down the debt that you're going to walk away from in a Chapter 7 liquidation, is going to say, hand me over the car, or figure out a way to make payments to me so that I can give you back your car, and you can buy it from the trustee over a period of time, usually 6 months. Some trustees may go a little bit farther out than that. But generally speaking, they're going to take your assets and sell them and then distribute them to your creditors. The first group that will always get paid first are the IRS taxes. And student loans can't be gotten rid of in Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. Some of the interest in Chapter 13 can be put into a payment plan, but the reality is that these are priority liens, and you're not going to be able to walk away from taxes, student loans, and in some cases, circumstances are difficult for you. Chapter 13, I like to call it indentured servitude, because what happens is they give you a certain amount of expenses that you're allowed to incur on a monthly basis, and the rest is disposable income. And that disposable income is going to be applied to a payment plan that will last 3 to 5 years depending on your debt. All right, we're going to go for a break, and we'll come right back. If you have any questions, call into 888-565-1470. Watch the show on WNN1470.com.
Are you losing sleep at night due to your debt situation? Call attorney Joseph Bryan today to sit down for a free consultation to discuss your rights. The People's Advocate is the trade name of the Bryan Law Group. The People's Advocate provides services to individuals and small businesses in bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sales, loan modifications, debt relief, consumer law, and estate planning in the South Florida area. Your initial consultation is free of charge. Proudly serving the South Florida community for over 21 years. Attorney Joseph Bryan will listen to your concerns and discuss options available to you. For more information, please call the People's Advocate at 888-828-9008. That's 888-828-9008. You are listening to the People's Advocate Hour with South Florida Attorney Joseph Bryan. He keeps you informed about your rights when it comes to bankruptcy or foreclosure and wants you to be part of his show. Call 888-565-1470 and help him help you get informed. Now, back to our show.
Hi there, this is Joe Bryan, the People's Advocate, and we're on WNN 1470. While we're in the break, I was just reviewing a few questions that came in on our Twitter accounts. Feel free to keep on sending in these questions, also through our Facebook, and it's also could give us a call in on 888-565-1470. I'll take your call and I'll answer your questions. One of the questions that came into us from Bob in Boca. Hope you like my answers. How long does foreclosure stay on your record? We're talking about your credit history. Well, the reality is that I'm assuming that you're saying a foreclosure that went through to final judgment. And in that case, if it's a final judgment, at least 7 years to 12 years. And of course, they have a judgment, and they can keep on reviewing that judgment and make it last up to 20. However, how will it affect you? The reality is that if you are paying other debts on a timely basis, and you have other credit that you're taking care of, such as a car payment, such as another credit card, the reality is that within 1 to 2 years, that foreclosure issue can be not necessarily removed, but your credit rating can be rehabilitated through, once again, paying existing credit that you do have, or going out there and getting a secured credit card and building credit back. In addition, if you do actually go through a foreclosure, there are limitations under federal law and under lending laws that limit you to get anything but a private loan to purchase a property for 2 years. Once again, that's one of the reasons why one would consider doing a short sale, because if you do a short sale, it becomes a settlement and it becomes a different remark on your credit. And as a consequence, doing the short sale means that you paid less than is owed, versus you defaulted, got foreclosed on, and there's a final judgment. So you can get your credit back. You just have to work at it. And even though it stays on your credit report, the more positive remarks that end up on your credit profile, the less effect the foreclosure has, and the farther it gets into your past, the less effect it has on that moment's credit worthiness. How does foreclosure affect your credit? Depending on where you are, were you an 850 or were you a 575? Generally speaking, it begins to hurt you initially with the initial filing between 1 and 200 credit points droppage. I haven't seen anybody with greater than a 250-point drop due to a foreclosure, but it wouldn't shock me if you had an 850 and if you dropped down to a 520. For those that don't know what we're talking about the credit reporting points. An 850 is a stellar credit profile. Somebody who has a 420 or a 520 has a lot of other bad things on their credit, most likely. And then we also have another Twitter in from Mary in Delray. She's been paying the minimum on her credit cards, and it hasn't worked for her, and it hasn't worked for most Americans. One should sit down with a credit counseling person, preferably an attorney, and review what's going on. There's lots of ways to handle it. One way is, if you're financially in a position to do it, to make some lump sum offers. Two, if you've gotten to a point where you're about to hit the wall, a lot of credit cards will consider different alternatives. Some will do forbearances. I know of somebody who had great credit until he went into a divorce, and of course the economic downturn hurt him at that time as well. And he had these credit lines for his business, and he had these credit cards with $10,000, $20,000 on these credit cards. He had close to $100,000 in unsecured debt. It was looking pretty bad. He went to one group where he had $30,000 on their credit line, and they agreed to waive interest, to waive specific payments, and they allowed him to start making payments on principal only, waived all interest, which I thought was great, and allowed him to take down the debt without actually having to go into bankruptcy. In the end, he was forced into a Chapter 13 because he has good income and he has assets that he wanted to protect. But the reality is that, yes, banks are willing to work with you. I think it really comes down to your net worth, which is the assets you have less the obligations that you have against them. And it also has to do with your income flow. But a lot of credit card companies are much more savvy than they were back in 2006 and have begun to recognize that it's best to work with the client, because these clients are people that they're going to want to work with now because they're going to want them in the future. Speaking of credit, one of the interesting things is I'm originally from Canada, and when I came down here, I found that the ease of credit in the United States was unbelievable. A typical credit card for a person who's a decent credit risk in Canada is 16.7%. Somebody who's got no credit history will have a small amount, like $1,000 or $1,200 access to credit, and they'll want 18.7% for that. If you find somebody in Canada with a 7.4% credit card, they're probably a multimillionaire. But here in the United States, when I first came down here, it was shocking to see young people with credit cards with $5,000 and $10,000 worth of credit lines. It was shocking for me. Not because it wasn't based upon their ability to pay. It was based upon some unknown thing called, well, they don't have bad credit, so they have a good credit profile, so we'll give them money because they've got good credit. We're not going to look to see how they pay back. Well, there's hundreds and hundreds of banks here in the United States, and there's really only 4 major banks in Canada, so they've got a little bit more control over it. And one of the things that they want to see is, how will you pay back this credit if you have it? Down here, a lot of people can get themselves into a lot of difficult situations because of the free flow of credit, and that's a very bad thing, because you don't want to get yourself in a position that's beyond your means. And that's one of the other things I did notice here in our culture is that people seem to want to live beyond the means. I have friends that are driving in cars that are costing them $1,200, $1,400 a month, including the insurance and the interest that they're paying. And it shocks me that somebody would pay as much as a house to drive a car. But this is the culture we live in. We're big spenders, and we find ourselves going beyond our credit. So, Mary, you need to sit down with somebody. You're welcome to give me a call in the office or come on in or give us a call over here. We can talk in more detail about what kind of credit we're talking about. But I never really think anybody that has less than $10,000 in debt should even be looking at a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13. You really need to be in bigger debt than that. In the past, most people that were filing for bankruptcy was because they found themselves in massive medical debt. But today it runs a much different situation. People are finding ways to try to restructure their debt, trying to restructure their upside-down house. There's a new move going on in the bankruptcy court where they're letting you go into a mediation program where you try to work things out with the lender and try to figure out a way to either modify the loan or cram down the loan or pay some of the upside down. I haven't heard anything fantastic coming out of the bankruptcy court where these are concerned. However, there are opportunities in Chapter 13 to reevaluate the debt and make a payment plan to resolve it. And that's one of the things to consider. Credit cards can be a curse, and paying the minimum means you will never pay off the debt. It will never happen. Paying the minimum is a way for you to make the credit card companies very wealthy, because that's where they make their money. They're making all that interest, and you're paying the minimum amount, and I'm sure you'll notice that your debt continues to grow without spending more money on that credit card. Like I said, some of the things that you can to reduce your debt is negotiate with the lender, close out accounts, and make offers of settlement. If you have a $10,000 credit card, the chances of a bigger reduction is much better than a $1,200 credit card. A $1,200 credit card is more likely going to settle for $800 or $900. A $10,000 credit card might be willing to sell for $2,000 or $3,000. It just comes down to who the lender is, how old the debt is, how long you've been in default. I'm assuming that if you're paying the minimums, you're not in default, but if you are in default, the longer you're in default, the more likely they'll be negotiated, or the more likely the debt has been written off and sold, at which point the new owner has bought it at a great discount and is more likely to discount more than the original lender. Alrighty. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was also the fair debt collection. I keep on hearing how people get phone calls coming into them at work, calling them on their cell phone while they're at work, calling them at home at 7:45 in the morning, just as you're jumping out of the shower and thinking that it might be something important, calling you at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. There's some debt collectors out there that are extremely unscrupulous and don't concern themselves with the Fair Debt Collection Act or any of the rules and regulations set forth by the Federal Trade Commission, or any of the rules that may or may not exist here in Florida. And they do what they want without concern, because they incorporate in their analysis the chances of getting caught. How many of you people are going to go ahead and file complaints? How many of you are going to hold them to the fire? But the truth is that you do have rights as a debtor, and you do have the rights not to be harassed. One of the things that you do have the right to do is, once you find out who the creditor is that's contacting you, you can actually send them a cease and desist letter saying, please do not contact me again except to verify the debt. And then at that point in time, once you've sent that in to them, 5 or 10 days out, if they start calling you, you start to keep a log of the time, the date, if the person will give you their first name or their caller ID. Each one usually has a collector identification number that you can refer back, what the name of the firm is. And you can go ahead and stop these incessant phone calls and the harassment that's coming your way. These are important things to keep in mind. You shouldn't live under the threat of debt, and you shouldn't live in fear of not knowing your rights. You have rights. You have the ability to move forward in life. I met so many people that had spent a long time not dealing with the issues. And the reasons why they didn't deal with the issues is because they didn't know they had options. I've had people who have come to me, and they're coming to me at the very end of their case in a foreclosure, and they had a good lawyer representing them, but they never asked him any questions. They never involved him in some of the other matters that existed in their lives, and they found themselves between a rock and a hard place because they waited too long. The key is to reach out, find a professional. There's a lot of good attorneys out there, despite what you hear. Okay, there's a few bad apples, and you'll know them the moment you walk in, because they'll be handing you a contract versus wanting to talk to you about the issues at hand. Anybody walks in a room with you to give you a consultation and he's got a contract in hand, they're not interested in discussing your problems. They're interested in making money off of you. The truth is that you should be able to sit down with a professional, discuss the concerns that you have. If he's got enough intelligence and experience, he should be able to sit down and say, okay, I have a few other questions for you, because it's very obvious to him that there's other issues that go beyond the issues that you're talking to me. I've had several people come in to me talking to me about bankruptcy, and it became that there were other issues that were far more important in their lives that they had to take care of. I've also had the same thing with people coming in a foreclosure situation where they're concerned about losing their house, but there's far greater issues, financial issues going on that go far beyond just the foreclosure. If you're thinking about filing a bankruptcy, to prevent you from losing your house. Well, you definitely want to consider the timing. Once the bank has gotten a final judgment, the process of getting a relief from the bankruptcy court, is called relief from stay, is almost a rubber stamp unless there's something wrong, unless you're complaining that the bank doesn't have a right to this claim, which generally speaking is not true. But there's those few exceptions. One should be doing that, filing the bankruptcy before somebody gets a final judgment. The reality is because then they still have to go back to trial after the bankruptcy, assuming that you do get discharged in bankruptcy, and there's still more options available to you after the bankruptcy. Some people may not be capable of getting a loan modification with all the debts that they're servicing. They look at your debts, they see what you have to service, they see your income, they say there's no way we can make a loan modification plan that fits into the structures that are available, whether it be the HAMP or whether it be any of the internal programs that the bank may have, because there's just no way that they can see a way with all your debt. But after bankruptcy, you've gotten rid of all these unsecured creditors, you can get rid of taxes in bankruptcy as long as they're 4 years old. There's a whole, we'll go through a section in this in the next few weeks where we'll actually talk about taxes and bankruptcy, and I'll go into detail. That's a section we'll talk about on its own. But the reality is you can get rid of taxes. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out right now that are dealing with the fact that they owe taxes. I've seen a lot of people that have been pushed from W-2s to 1099s to reduce the overhead and expenses for the businesses. I don't think it has anything to do with the best interest of the employee/independent contractor now. But you'll find yourself all of a sudden owing a lot of money in taxes next year because you're now at 1099 and there's no withholdings, and now you have self-employment tax, and all of a sudden you're owing a lot of money. Sometimes it's a couple $1,000s. That's not really frightening. But I had one gentleman come to my office. He had $400,000 in tax owed due to the fact that he had a business that failed, but the year before it failed, he made money. And then he lost so bad it was scary. But it didn't matter because of the way in which the losses were. They weren't taxed helpful for him, and it was the taxes were owed the year before. So here he was sitting on $400,000 worth of liability, but it was 4 years old. It fit within the parameters. And along with everything else he walked away from $400,000. Once again, bankruptcy can offer a lot of good things. So, once again, this is the People's Advocate Hour. I'm Joseph Bryan, or Joe Lawyer. And we're on WNN 1470. If you have any questions, feel free to give a call in at 888-565-1470. And by the way, we are streaming on WNN1470.com.
Are you losing sleep at night due to your debt situation? Call attorney Joseph Bryan today to sit down for a free consultation to discuss your rights. The People's Advocate is the trade name of the Bryan Law Group. The People's Advocate provides services to individuals and small businesses in bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sales, loan modifications, debt relief, consumer law, and estate planning in the South Florida area. Your initial consultation is free of charge. Proudly serving the South Florida community for over 21 years, Attorney Joseph Bryan will listen to your concerns and discuss options available to you. For more information, please call the People's Advocate at 888-828-9008. That's 888-828-9008. You are listening to the People's Advocate Hour with South Florida attorney Joseph Bryan. He keeps you informed about your rights when it comes to bankruptcy or foreclosure and wants you to be part of his show. Call 888-565-1470 and help him help you get informed. Now, back to our show.
Hey there. Well, we're on the People's Advocate Law Hour. We're talking about issues that affect the people. My name is Attorney Joseph Bryan, Joe the Lawyer. If you find the need to sit down and have a face-to-face with me, I do offer free consultations in my Hollywood offices. At 954-320-6940, you'll talk to my assistant, Sarah. And Sarah will take down your information and set you up for an appointment, and you can come on in for a free consultation. And quite candidly, I won't be handing you a contract until you ask for one. Because the reality is when you come to my office, the key is to discuss the issues that are concerning you, the issues that I discover that you didn't know you should ask, and then we'll come up with a plan of action, and sometimes that involves Joe Bryan, and sometimes it involves you just taking care of things. Alrighty, so let's talk about some of the questions that have come in. Just you should be aware, if you have any questions, you can call in and talk to me directly on 888-565-1470. And you can watch us on WNN1470.com because we're live streaming. Listen, one of the persons contacted me about debt settlement plans. And to be candid with you as an attorney, I've had several people contact me in the past asking me to participate with their businesses. But I'm not really happy with any of the programs that I've seen. There's a company out there called Nolo Publications. They are a publisher of self-help books. You can go to nolo.com, Nolo.com, and you can find books on how to repair your credit, how to deal with your debts, and how to negotiate with the creditors. Some people feel incompetent or they feel intimidated by the process, and that has a lot to do with ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing. I feel that if you have the ability to read, you're able to learn what you need to know. The forms are in the book. Matter of fact, they're on the CD that comes with the book. And you can pretty much do your own debt settlement plan on your own. Here's what I don't like about these upfront fees and the promises of 60% reduction. I remember when everybody was on the radio promising loan modifications when the banks weren't doing them. I foolishly believed the hype myself, and as part of my foreclosure defense packages, I was promising that I would give a refund for anybody that didn't get a modification. I only got one out of every 8 person I dealt with. I gave back a lot of money. It hurt, but I gave back a lot of money because my word is my bond. But it did. I mean, I remember figuring out how I was going to pay my bills that month and return 2 people's fees that they had paid me to go get their modification. But I believed the hype. The truth of the matter is back in 2007, 2008, the banks weren't doing modifications. And it took 2 years sometimes to find out that that wasn't the case. Where you worked on a product for 2 years and ended up writing back a check for everything you got paid. It was a shocking thing to be me. But like I said, I really believe that the value of a man is in his word, and I promised I would give back their money if I couldn't get them a modification, and I did that time and time again. Now things have changed, and of course I don't make those promises anymore. It was a costly learning process. I just do my best efforts. But at the same time, now the banks have come around and they are actually doing modifications where it is possible. Now, debt settlement plans, from what I've seen, are a way to make other people get paid. I see many, many times where the person has been paying for as much as 18 months where they've not settled a single situation, and the people are coming to me because these creditors are now suing them in county court or circuit court, county court being less than $10,000 or $15,000 and $15,000 being circuit court. I don't see them getting the 60% reductions that they promise. And I don't find that there's a strong need in our country for people to feel that what they say is what they mean. Nothing happened, and what can you do? Well, I personally believe the debt settlement companies that make these promises to you should be reported to the Attorney General of the state of Florida. I personally am working with the Attorney General on an issue to do with one of those home preservation companies that break into people's homes and cause them great harm while they're at work. And the police like to call it a civil action. But the state attorney is the first start. The Better Business Bureau is another place to start. Quite candidly, harming them and at least making it so that they see that you're going to go and you can file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. There's a place for you to go there to do that at the FTC. File complaints. I would do it administratively because filing lawsuits sometimes aren't beneficial, but if you've paid less than $5,000, I would take them to small claims court. And I would argue that breach of contract, failure to perform, they're going to want to settle for you because they don't want to have these lawsuits. They don't want to hire an attorney. But once again, there's not much for you to do. You'll look at your contract, and generally speaking, I don't think that you'll find in the contract that they made a promise of 60%. That was part of a sales pitch. Rick in Fort Lauderdale, you're welcome to give me a call. 954-320-6940. Make an appointment. Come on in and see me face-to-face. Bring in the contract with you. I'll give you a free consultation. I'll look it over. And I'll also take a look at what your situation is and see if there's another strategy that you might employ that you can overcome this reprobate. Reprobate is a person who has no morals, who doesn't feel an obligation to keep their promise. Don't think very highly of people like this, but people seem to think that they can say whatever they need to say to get your money and not worry about it because most people don't sue. And that's the reality. Once again, anybody that feels the need and wants a free consultation in the privacy of my office, they're welcome to give a call to my office and speak to Sarah. Call 954-320-6940, and we'll give you a free consultation in the office to deal with your issues. If you want to call in and get some answers right now, call 888-565-1470. In addition, we're streaming on WNN1470.com. Alrighty. Now, how much do bankruptcies cost? Well, it depends upon the situation. It depends upon how complex your bankruptcy is going to be. Generally speaking, bankruptcies for Chapter 7 from a professional attorney who is doing the job on an ongoing basis in his office is going to run between $1,500 and $2,500 for a Chapter 7. Palm Beach is generally higher, more expensive than Miami. I think the farther south you go, the more inexpensive bankruptcies seem to go. The reality is that Chapter 13s can run around $1,300 and go up from there. And to be candid, even a Chapter 7 can go up because sometimes the Chapter 7 is not consumer debt. It may involve a lot more business debt than just consumer debt, at which point in time you'll be finding yourself paying substantially more. You know, I've seen some people come into other offices and pay $7,500, but they're also walking away from $12 million in bank debt related to their businesses where they signed off on their personal guarantees. So sometimes, but generally speaking, $1,500 to $2,500 for a Chapter 7, and around $3,500 and up in a Chapter 13. However, often or not, they'll take less money up front and get paid as an administrative expense on a monthly basis as part of your payment plan. Be aware that a lot of the Chapter 13 payment plans don't survive. They don't get all the way through to discharge. I've heard as much as 60 to 70% of the Chapter 13s don't go all the way through to discharge because people can't make it. You got to understand, in the Chapter 13, all of your disposable income is going to be applied to pay your creditors. And one reason why I don't like it is because, guess what? You've been able to be frugal. You've figured some things out. You start to climb out of the bankruptcy situation in the sense of your finances start to improve, and you've been able to learn how to make more money. And your tax return in year number 2 of your 5-year plan shows that you've increased your income from 20 to 30%. But guess what? That means that your disposable income has gone up. So there will be a readjustment of the payment plan by the trustee, and you'll be paying more money to the creditors. So there, it's servitude for 3 to 5 years. I don't know how many people know about how, before we had slavery in America, we had another group of people called indentured servants. These were people that were coming from debtor prisons in Europe, and their debt was being sold. They were being shipped to America, and you would work, in some cases, as much as 10 years to pay off your debt, and you were in servitude, called indentured servants. I'm sure you've seen it in the movies. Well, there are people that founded this country, and they were the backbone of America. And when the debtor prisons got emptied out, and there were not so many people in debtor prison anymore, or people were looking to come to the New World, that's when they went ahead and they went after slavery and that makes indentured servitude look like a good thing. Unfortunately, I look at Chapter 13 plans often as indentured servitude. There are some good things about 13s, though, and some of those things is when you're dealing with multiple property and you're an investor, and you have less than $1 million and change in secured debt, and less than $300,000+ in unsecured debt, you're able to structure yourself out when you have good income to move forward in life, and the benefits outweigh the detriments. But once again, a lot of the plans that start and you start doing these monthly payments in good intentions, and something goes wrong, a medical expense, a family emergency, these are all things that can interrupt your ability to make the payment, and don't make the payment and you get dismissed out of Chapter 13. So therefore, a lot of them do end up failing, and people find themselves falling out of the plan, and once again, that is not a good thing. All right. Question from Mimi from New York. By the way, the Acosta was from Paula in Aventura. Are loan modifications true today? I've been wasting a lot of time for mine. Well, I can't talk to you about what's going on up in the New York marketplace because I don't work up there. But my experience here is yes. If your loan modification's not going through today, I have to ask you who's processing it. I have to ask you, is your presentation complete? Listen, I have one modification I've been working on out of the Lake Placid area here in Florida, and I think we're on the fourth year of the foreclosure process, and I'm on the second year of the modification. Patience is a virtue. Look at the bright side. If you're not, you're working on a loan modification and you're not paying the rent right now. So that should allow you, in some cases, to pay down other debts. The foolish thing is to spend your money and live the lifestyle and not make the adjustments necessary to move out from the nightmare that you're in. Because you're not paying your mortgage. If you're not saving money while that's going on, then there's obviously something wrong with your lifestyle. Your income doesn't meet your lifestyle. So you're going to have to make an adjustment anyways, and it may be that you're borderline loan modification material, but they can't see a way that you can pay the mortgage in a modification, and they aren't prepared to give up on you because you're too close. You're in the gray zone, and they're waiting to see what's going to happen with your income and your expenses, to see if things change for you such that they can give you an offer. Once again, without knowing the name of the bank, without knowing the details, it's hard for me to give you a very specific answer. But loan modifications are happening today. One of the things that they have a lot of problem with, if you're self-employed, oh my God, these people just don't like self-employed people. Sometimes I've advised clients to say, listen, start taking a salary. Don't leave it all up to profit and loss. Get yourself a W-2. Don't be self-employed all the way. Because a lot of the people that are doing the processing and evaluating your loan modification, they can't figure it out. I have a client that's he loaned his company hundreds of thousands of dollars in the form of buying it equipment, in the form of lending it money to keep it in operations, and he has interest being paid to him on the loan that he gave to his company. And the bank just can't make heads or tails. It's like, what exactly is this interest income? They just can't accept that the fact that is he's getting paid for the money he lent his company. And, they have problems with self-employed people. Loan modifications for self-employed people is probably one of the hardest ones to pull off. We do pull them off, but I find that they take the longest for the banks to try to make sense out of and find a way to make it happen. If that's the case, it's really important that you not do this loan modification on your own and that you work with a professional that's processing loan modifications. And I'm not talking about one of those mills like the guys that do debt settlements. I'm talking about a legitimate attorney that does foreclosure defense and works with creditors and represents debtors and helps people in their process who has a clue. And, I find that people who are not attorneys that are doing this don't have the same sense of ethical obligation to do the right thing. Let me explain this. I'm an attorney. I'm a member of the bar. I'm expected to act in a certain way. Not all of us do, but I myself think that I have an obligation to be candid to my clients and to act effectively in their representation. And a person who's processing a loan who is not a member of the bar isn't held to a higher ethical standard because of his understanding of the law and his obligations, or hers. Finds themselves in a situation where they may not be having the right person representing them. And I'm not saying that an ex-loan person isn't the right person who doesn't understand the documents. I just don't think that that person is held up to those same standards. Okay? So, at this point in time, I just wanted to remind you that we're streaming on WNN147.com. Call in at 888-565-1470. And if you need to meet with me in person, you can always call my office number at 954-320-6940 and set up an appointment for your free consultation. We are on the People's Advocate Hour. And this is Attorney Joseph Bryan. I apologize. Okay, so let's go back to some of the things. I got kind of distracted here. And I guess I wanted to talk about other issues that may affect you. Sometimes the situation is beyond your control. Sometimes it's in your control, but you've been hiding from it. I found a lot of people will not go out there and figure out the answers that they need. Knowledge is power. There are lots of opportunities, and you can take care of it. One of the few things that I've witnessed in my office is people who finally understand that there's no gun to their head, that their world is not coming to an end, and that a little bit of information can really take the edge off. Much better than a scotch, not to mention how fattening it is. By the way, there's about 400 or 500 calories in a shot of scotch, so you can get really fat drinking. Keep that in mind. The People's Advocate Hour is not about drinking. It's about taking care of the people and finding out information so that they can be informed. Information is power. Bye. It was a pleasure having you. I'm Joseph Bryan, and we're on WNN 1470.
You have been listening to the People's Advocate Hour with Attorney Joseph Bryan. Join Attorney Joseph Bryan next week on the People's Advocate as you need to know your rights when it comes to bankruptcy or foreclosure. You can also contact our office at 954-889-7443 for a free consultation. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Talk 1470 WWNN Pompano Beach, WKIS HD3 Boca